Hi, this is Janine Bolin with Authorpreneurs HQ, which is hosting the Authorpreneurial Summit. And today we have the lovely Nikki Gangemi, who is with us today. Oh my gosh, it's been a fun time. She is an actress that became a teacher. Okay, that's the first thing that makes it so fun with her. Then she became an entrepreneur, and she basically knows how to take those big pivots in life, kind of like me being an analytical biochemist and moving to radio show host. You can totally see the lines and the way they connect. She also has found a way to become the leading lady in her own life. And this is the thing that is most important. She is an internationally board certified master success coach. She is also a master of NLP, master hypnotherapist, speaker, author, founder of Mindful Matters LLC. And she likes to say, I'm a personal trainer for your mind. And we all know how you need to have a buff brain if you're going to do what you need to do. So, Nikki, thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome, Janine. Thank you. Thank you for the fun intro. I love the laughter.
It's one of those things that as you're bouncing between rooms and everything, you're just like, okay, we're going to make this happen. So if you don't mind kind of leading us off, kind of talking to us a little bit about, we all know that authors have demons that they have to deal with. And then you publish your book. And then you have the dragons that you have to deal with. So the demons are the inner demons. And then the dragons are what everybody else tells you you need to do, what you need to have, how you need to make it happen. And sometimes it's just as daunting dealing with all those dragons. I don't care if you have, like myself, I have really strong vision. I know where I'm going, what I want to go. I'm laser focused, and still those dragons can get me down. So help bring us off the corners of the map, and how do we get back to our journey? So if you don't mind leading us off.
Sure, absolutely. And all of that is true. I went through all of those, the self-talk, the dragons. There was a time when I started the book and I let 7 or 8 months go by because I just kept putting it off and making excuses and, finally recommitted to it. And 4 months later, it was on Amazon. So what helped me was always going back to my purpose. For what purpose am I writing this book? For what purpose am I putting it out there? And that always helped me to separate from any of the overwhelm or the nonsense, and just getting back to that would help me to get into action. And sometimes we've got to silence those voices. People mean well, and there's lots of advice, there's lots of different ways and strategies to go about publishing a book, but we can get overwhelmed when we try to do it all. So rather than being scattered, I just did my own thing. And honestly, I didn't do it I don't know if traditional is the word, but I didn't do it with the formal launch and the Amazon bestseller, because then I would have waited a lot longer. And I'm the kind of person that done is better than perfect. And I just wanted to get it out there. So I was like, what does that look like if I were just to take this a big idea of having a team and everything and just doing it with a team of 2, me and my author, well, 3, and my virtual assistant. And that's what I did. So I got it out there. And even though it's not a bestseller yet, I managed to already profit from the book. And I started to think beyond the book. So I started to look into this is the beginning, like you had mentioned earlier, this is the beginning of my message. And now what can I do with it? So I started to create a class, a course, a boot camp, and that ended up becoming ways that I made money from selling those classes. And then even getting coaching clients through doing free workshops, partnering with similar types of businesses in the wellness industry, say. So chiropractors, CBD oil stores, just complementary businesses that would give me the space and the people to do a complimentary workshop. And at the end of that, they could buy the book, and they can also get my lead magnet, which then, of course, there was an upsell. So there was different ways for people to come through into my world, from a low ticket to a higher ticket, like private coaching.
Thank you so much. And I've put your bonus in the chat. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes, my calm method. So that actually was created before the book. It's a guide that teaches you the steps of calm. Calm, the acronym, is a 4-step framework from how to go from the chaos, not only your thoughts in your mind, but all the voices of others. Whose voice Is it anyway? And how do you quiet that? So you have the clarity and confidence to keep taking action and making those empowering decisions that are going to drive you forward. So it helps you to do just that. And it actually acts as like an e-journal. So you can even type your thoughts into it. And I show you the questions to ask yourself to help you to make those shifts.
Wonderful. Because I know that a lot of times when we're in the chaos and we're trying to make decisions, and that's the worst time to make decisions as a human being or as an entrepreneur or authorpreneur, is when you're all wrapped up in your own thoughts and you're in that negative space. So is there some tips that you can give us to move from being in that really high level of chaos and then calming down? And then I'm going to open up the room to the brain trust and have people give their recommendations. So if you're here in the room with us, kind of think about what are things that you do that help you get out, because that's one of the things about the summit is that we're all authors. We all have tips and techniques, and our speakers lead, but then we can follow up with our own advice to others. So go ahead, Nikki. You have this wonderful system. So
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. We all have tips and tricks. So a couple of tips is first, when you notice that you're in overwhelm or fear or doubt, whatever that unwanted emotion is to stop it. It's literally just to stop and tune in to yourself and take a couple of deep breaths. I love using 7-11 breathing, where you breathe in for a count of 7 and then you exhale for a count of 11. And that longer exhale helps to calm down the nervous system. Once we start shifting those emotions, it's like putting on a different pair of glasses. You start to see the situation and people much differently. And then a second tip is to ask yourself, where's my focus? What is my attention on? What is that negative self-talk that I'm saying to myself? And then write it down on paper and speak it out loud, because we process things differently. Did you ever think something to yourself and then share that with someone and then immediately say, well, no, I didn't mean that? Like, it sounds so different when you hear it externally, right? And then the third step is to then, once you realize that that negative self-talk is not 100% true, is to start reframe it. And that just means to say it in a different way. Well, what else might be true? And once you start thinking more higher class thoughts, or first class thoughts, I like to call them, now you could see the solutions that perhaps were there all along.
cool. I'd like your perspective, since you're the one that's taken all this NLP. You understand this, that some people have been taught, okay, take a deep breath. And so they go and they hold and then they exhale, and they're more anxious than they were when they started. There are certain personalities like that. Do you care to chat a little bit about how with them they have a different breathing technique that they have to use?
Yeah, and there's different ways of breathing, and so a lot of us, we breathe like very shallow. We breathe up here from our chest, which is not really helpful. But you want to breathe. What I tell people is to put your hands on your belly, and you want to, when you take a deep breath in, you want to feel the belly expand like a balloon. And then another trick is to then inhale a second time and then exhale and feel the belly go back in. So you could breathe in and breathe in again, and then you can exhale. And I say breathe in through your nose and exhale through pursed lips. When I used to teach elementary school, I would tell the kids, smell the flowers and blow out the birthday candles. And I taught them how to breathe.
See, that's about the level I like learning. That to me is more fun. I love kindergarten teachers because they're really simplistic. And I'm like, that really works for this brain. And it's just because then it's more fun. Breathe in the flowers and blow out the birthday candles. Guess what? I'd much rather do that than sit there and count 1, 2, 3.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing the kindergarten example. Janine's brain gets into that one. It's like, yay, we're having fun now. Enough of the serious stuff. I want the kids stuff. Thank you. Then you have more colors and it's more fun. So thank you. I'm only partially kidding. but that's what I mean. There's these different breathing techniques, and you can get so wrapped up in your brain with it that you're not out of anxiety. Because now you're cranking on the fact that you're having to track your 7-Eleven breathing. And
That's
but if I
right.
focus on, this is just me speaking, but if I focus on birthday candles and flowers, I'm going to put myself in a better space,
Right. And
maybe
distract
that, I mean,
yourself from the problem.
exactly. Thank you. Which is why it's all about pie. Okay. I don't know if you know this, but in Men in Black, I was like laughing hysterically in the movie theater when Tommy Lee Jones' character says, "You know what time it is? It's time for pie." Because they had hit an impasse in this mystery. And the young kid is like, "Are you kidding me? This is not the time. We need to go. We need action, 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 action." And I felt like Tommy Lee Jones and Smith were both sitting there, and those are the two sides of my brain arguing in that moment on that screen. I'm like, oh my gosh, because the one side is screaming at me for action, and the other side is like, we need pie. And they go and they distract themselves and they have pie, and the light bulb comes on. The guy dashes out the door, and they solve the mystery, and the good guy wins. And that's always fun. But but for us, back to the topic at hand, Nikki. When it comes to distraction, help us with NLP, help guide us on what are some good ways to distract ourselves, because we get into our own mess,
We
you know?
do. And distraction is good. Sometimes we just need a brain break. We just need to distract ourselves, go for a walk. So one of my mentors taught me this: do 10 jumping jacks while saying, I love myself, I love myself. And that makes me laugh hysterically every time. So that's a good one. If you could
That
do,
is a good one.
or a modified version of jumping jacks. And then the other thing is you do want to tend to it, so you could distract yourself. That's great. And if you find that the same issue or the same problem is coming up, then you'll want to use a tool like the calm method or breathing or tapping. If you're familiar with EFT, there's so many different tools and techniques that you can use to process the energy, to process the emotion that you're feeling, get to the root cause of what is that. It's usually a negative emotion, a limiting belief, or internal conflict. Part of you wants to do something. Maybe part of you wants to be a best-selling author, but then there's this other part that fears criticism and judgment, being called out. Who do you think you are? What do you know? And that conflict will cause us to self-sabotage. So you want to get clear on that and work with what the root cause is, clear it, and then you're just going to be a rock star. You're going to be like, yep, showing up confidently, compelled to take action, and doing the things you commit to doing.
And with self-sabotage, that's a word that's used a lot. And so what are some examples that you can give us that mean self-sabotage? Because sometimes that word gets kind of mushy in my brain. And so educate the kindergartner that likes flowers and birthday candles.
Absolutely. Well, so how about getting in your own way? Right? That phrase. I just,
Yeah.
or I take a few steps forward and then I take a couple of steps back, and I'm doing that dance again. So, it looks like being excited about doing something, and you start to take action, and then before you know it, there's this reason comes up, this excuse comes up, you start talking yourself out of something, but you don't feel good about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually regret, like I wish I would have just done it, that kind of a thing. And that's when you know that you're getting in your own way, and you've got to remove, I don't know if you used the word dragons or demons before, but you want to move what is that stuff that's inside of you. And like I said, negative emotion could be fear, doubt, overwhelm, limiting beliefs that we have. Who am I to do this? I don't have what it takes. What if I can't handle it all? Fear of success is another one that people struggle with. And again, that internal conflict. Part of you wants one thing, but then there's this other part. So once you resolve all of that, it's gone. And now it's just clarity on this is my next step and this is the next step. And you just keep moving forward, getting help when you need it, and being willing to look at things as everything is information, everything is feedback. What do I need to tweak and change? Just like the pilot, when they're 1 degree off course, they recalculate, they get back on track. And focusing on excellence versus perfectionism. Those are some success principles to help you to keep moving forward.
So any questions for Nikki? Yvonne, lovely to meet you. Lovely to have you back on with us, dear one. Thank you. And Michael will be our next speaker. But any questions for Nikki on what she's talking about?
Sure,
Since I've asked. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah. So this whole thing that you're talking about, I've experienced it, and that feeling, that this is not right, or so why do we ignore that? Why do so many, and people do it all the time, and I see people talk about it all the time, and I still am trying to figure out why we ignore that. What tips do you have for us to not ignore that, or to not ignore it?
And when you say and ignore that, meaning those thoughts that come up, that
those limiting beliefs kind of things. And
it takes, so the first thing that came to me is it takes a lot of courage to look at yourself. Some people are afraid to admit, right? It takes courage. And it also takes courage to take personal responsibility. There's been times when I realized that I held on to certain things because if I admitted that I was wrong, whoa. If I admitted I was wrong for 30 years, that's a big pill to swallow. So to avoid having to feel that, I could just sweep these things under the rug and continuing to point the finger and blame, because sometimes that just feels easier.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. And it's really big in the author world also.
Yeah. So for lack of a better word, the perfect storm that has to come together for change is having the awareness first of what's going on, what's holding you back, what's preventing you, what are those limiting beliefs, having the willingness to change. Some people have the awareness and then the wall goes up. Oh, I don't want to hear it. Right. So you have to have the awareness and the willingness, and then being open to admitting that perhaps I've been wrong all these years and there's another way, there's a better way. And just having a mentor or somebody outside of you to help you to make those shifts.
Yeah, that makes sense, having the mentor. So having someone like yourself who isn't isn't your mother or your brother or your sister or somebody like that, right?
Very right. You don't want to have your mother or brother mentor you. You want someone that's not related. There's that would be, because you don't want advice giving, right? None of us want advice. We want to be asked the powerful questions that are going to help us come to our own realization, because we have to see it ourselves. If somebody just delivers it to you as advice, oftentimes it's just rejected and it prolongs the problem.
Because they could be absolutely off course and wrong in the way they have decided to label you. So if you don't mind, Nikki, would you grab your book that's behind you and show it to people, your Calm book?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So this is her book, Calm. And if you don't mind, we kind of skipped over. I got very excited. You mentioned birthday candles and flowers, and I got excited. Would you kind of run through what Calm stands for? Because I don't think we covered that.
We did not. No, thank you. So calm, the C in calm stands for conscious. The A is aware. The L is lean. And the M is make. So now I'm going to go one layer deeper. The C is conscious of how you're feeling. Sometimes we don't know the thoughts in our mind because there are tens of thousands of them, but we can identify how we're feeling: overwhelmed, doubtful, aware of the thoughts you're thinking. What are those negative thoughts? And then, like a lawyer, put them on trial and ask, are these facts, or are they opinions, beliefs, interpretations? Usually they are. And then lean into what else is possible. So what else is true? What else? What's another option? You start reframing those thoughts. And M is make a new decision. Now that you've processed the emotion, your focus is on possibility. What's your new decision? And then take immediate action if it feels good and it's inspired, before you talk yourself out of it or somebody else does. So that's the calm method.
Thank you very much. I wanted to make sure we covered that. The other thing is Nikki's really good at talking people off the ledge. I don't know how many of you have ever experienced this, where you're sitting there, you think you've gone in one direction, you thought it was going to work out really great. Many programs I've built, blah, 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 only to watch them just crash and burn in front of you. And you feel desolate and you're like, I'm out of ideas. This is the worst thing ever. And that before you know it, you're spiraling into that rabbit hole. And so to have somebody talk you off the ledge like Nikki is very helpful, because she's not sitting there just giving you contrary opinion. Like, how many of you have had that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, things are so awful, this has happened, this, and then another person says, well, at least you have this, well, the sun's shining, well, and what do you want to do? You just want to reach out and just slap them upside the head? Or maybe that's just me, maybe it's my problem, but it's like, this is not helpful. I need somebody to help me crawl out of this mass of emotions that I have. So thank you for being with us. Any tips you want to give us on the NLP? You were talking about tapping. Not everybody is familiar with it, but there are certain little exercises you can do that are very helpful in distracting people out of the rabbit hole.
Yeah, tapping is, that's a great tool. It takes a little bit to learn, because there's basically 3 steps to the recipe of tapping. As far as NLP, a tip that I would use is to pay attention to the thoughts that you're thinking, and be willing to shift it to, and the word is reframe, but reframing it is just putting a different frame around it so you could see it differently. For example, somebody could say, oh, my daughter, she's so mouthy. She just talks back all the time, and it really bothers me that she doesn't listen to me. And somebody else can say, well, won't you appreciate that when she's 21 years old and she speaks up to the men who are being inappropriate to her? And now suddenly the dad could soften and see, yeah, I actually like that my daughter is mouthy and speaks up, because it's going to serve her well. So we can change, we could put it in a different context, and it helps you to see something differently. And the final tip I'll give is turning statements into questions. A lot of times we give a dead end statement. I don't know what to write. Like, that's just an example. My mind is blank. Well, where do you go from there? So it's like noticing it and then saying, if I were to know what to write, I wonder what might flow out of my mind right now. And then listen to what comes out. So start asking yourself some outcome-oriented questions that are focused on the outcome. What's one step I could take? If I did know, what step might I take? What step feels exciting for me to take next? So ask yourself questions, because your brain is going to answer questions. So give it some quality questions, and you're more likely to get quality answers. Oh.
Thank you for that, because I remember one time, thank you for that. I remember one time I was in a conference, and I watched a speaker use just that. It was delightful, because the person stood up, she had all these questions, and the speaker turned to her and said, okay, how would you blah, 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 blah. And she goes, I don't know. He goes, well, what would you do if you did know? And she actually came up with an answer, and you could just see the look of shock on her face. That's the power of those type of questions. So I love it that you brought it up, because it's one of those things. I don't care how often you hear this stuff. This stuff is what is so imperative for you to do for the great SEO in your head. It's trained to find an answer. So you feel like, oh my God, I'm such a loser. I can't believe this has happened. Why does this always happen to me? Your brain will come up with every situation since you were 3 years old that you have to answer that question. So Nikki, thank you for reminding us to use it in the positive, which is, okay, this is a sabotaged mess. However, I know I have an answer somewhere. And I want to share with people that what Nikki's talking about is get it yourself. And if you kind of draw a blank and it's kind of not working for you, then ask who. Sometimes it's not what we are supposed to do, but who is somebody that can help me get over that. And it's amazing. The person that'll pop in your head, you give them a call and they've got the answer. It's amazing. Thank you, Nikki. I love it that you brought up these these questions. And then where would you recommend, is there a place on your website for people to learn more about tapping? Because I have found that very helpful when I was in extreme distress.
Yes, you could go to my website, and also coming soon, and by soon I mean next week, I'm going to have another free gift, which is Overwhelm to Crystal Clear on My Next Step. And in it, there is a tapping video with you follow me, tap along with me, and it's a script, and it helps you to go from too many ideas and I'm in overwhelm to crystal clear on where to start. And along with it comes a intro to tapping tutorial where I explain everything about tapping and how to tap as a foundational. So that will be available next week.
Yes, please make sure that you reach back around to me with all of that so we can let Authors HQ know about it, Authorpreneurs HQ know about it, because that's one of those things that when you folks, whether you're a speaker, an attendee, you're an author, you come up with ideas, you find a new way to work with things. There are people out there that need it, especially if they're in overwhelm. Our world has become very, it feels like a lot of us are on quicksand. We don't know what's happening from one moment to the next. And so what I do is I stand on concrete, which is I know what I want out of this life. Now it's just a matter of me figuring out who do I call and how do I get it, to come to me. And so those are the questions that I ask myself. So any closing thoughts? We have about 10 more minutes. Any closing thoughts you want to give us, Nikki?
Yes, while you were talking, I just thought of another tapping video that I have out there, which is also complimentary, and that's tapping for your next 10K. So in it, because you could use tapping for manifesting as well, manifesting money, for example. So that's another, I'll send you the information, Janine, so you can get it to people.
Yes,
Yeah.
because we'll add it to the bonuses that are here for our all access pass holders. Yeah, we'll definitely do that. So tapping for your next K is something that will be added to the bonus. Oh, 10K. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So final thoughts, and I'll take questions as well. I want to say to also give yourself grace. If you're anything like me, you're hard on yourself. And we are our own worst enemy. So even just thinking of it like, I heard it from somebody, I don't remember, but it's like almost like we've got to parent ourselves. When you notice that you're saying something like, oh, you idiot, you forgot to do this. And it's like, take a breath. And it's like, what would you say if that were your 5-year-old child? And starting to speak to yourself like that. It just helps us to get out of any kind of resistance and needing to control. And being kind to yourself, Lisa is saying. And so that's another thing, give yourself more grace and forgiveness, self-forgiveness specifically.
Excellent. Do we have any questions for Nikki today? Okay, we're good. Awesome. All right. Well, we have about 20 minutes before our next speaker, who will be Michael Whitehouse, and he will talk to us about networking, not only how to do it well, but how to make it something that is a income stream for you. That's one of the neat things about when you start really networking well and you start doing follow-up, you can be very consistent in, if you meet one person, you can start learning how to make money with that one person. And that is where it really becomes exciting. So Nikki, anything else you want to share with us, or are we good to go?
If anybody has any questions, I mean, I didn't dive deeply into the different ways I went beyond the book. I just mentioned classes and courses. If you have any questions around that, I'm happy to share how I went about that.
Okay.
Anybody?
One of the things that I know for sure is that there are many entrepreneurs in this world, authorpreneurs, who struggle with money. And it's problematic for people who can help you with money, because that's where the guilt and the shame are. So 32 years of working with people with debt-free living, conservative lifestyle, how to move from where you are to where you want to be. One of the things that I had to talk to a lot of marriage therapists because of my clients. And I would say, I have clients come to me, they start talking to me, and then they'll talk to me all about their sex life. but I cannot get them to talk about their money because it's a taboo subject in America. And so she was like, well, that's because that's where the guilt and shame is. So a lot of times I would take the couples that were there to get financial counseling from me, and I would send them to a marriage therapist first to get that done. And then they would come to me because then they had tools on how to ask questions that didn't make them feel guilty or filled with shame. So those are some tips to do your own self-analysis on where you might be and what you can do to overcome them. Nikki, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. I love that you brought that up with the guilt and the shame specifically. A lot of times we focus on what we think the problem is. Like, my problem is I procrastinate. That's an example. And many times that's not the problem. It's something much deeper. It could be guilt, shame. It could be anger, sadness, resentment. The tip would be to work on processing the emotion, releasing the guilt, releasing the shame. That's something that I help people to do. There's a way to do it where you could release 30 or 40 years of guilt in 15 minutes. Basically, from your lifetime, you could just release it and start with a clean slate. So not to say you're never going to get guilty again or angry, but it's not going to be pent up and all of that. Like with drivers on the road, when people get road rage, they're really not that angry at the person who cut them off. That's decades of anger that got triggered. And that's why they're so mad. So that has to be processed. And once you release the emotion, you'll be amazed at how you start taking different actions. Suddenly you're like, what procrastination? Like, we didn't even work on that. We processed emotions and your behaviors changed. So, and that reminds me too, is not working from behavior. That's what a lot of people do. Even I'll give the example of weight loss. They start with, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to buy a Peloton. I'm going to buy these organic foods. And those are all behaviors. They do it for a little bit and then they go right back. And that's why we have something called yo-yo dieting. Get to the root, work with the emotions, work with the internal conflict and any of the limiting beliefs. And suddenly you're just naturally motivated and compelled to do those behaviors. Does that make sense?
It does. And Yvonne put in the chat, would you say money is more of a mindset than a goal to achieve? I figure you want to chat a little bit about that.
Money is definitely a mindset. Money is a tool. Money is energy. It's also a goal. People make the goal about money and they focus on that. But the problem is that if they don't work with their money story and the relationship that they have to money, they're going to keep being that hamster in a wheel, just kind of going round and round and creating the same results. So it's more useful to get to changing your money story, changing your relationship with money, making sure that it's a positive thing, and then also knowing what you value. For a lot of people, money is not their top value. You know, for example, for myself, my very first top value is transformation. So I've turned my money goals into goals around transformation. How many lives do I want to transform this month? And that is like, oh, yeah, well, I could do this to help this person transform and that leads to money. But you've got to know what drives you, because our values are like, I've heard somebody say, call it a guiding light. They're our guiding light. They really drive us. So when you work from what's important to me, you will hit that goal eventually. But like I said, there's layers. There's clearing out the negative. You know, for a lot of people, they've learned that people with money are greedy and money is the root of all evil, but there's all these subconscious beliefs that people have that get in the way. And so when we release that and we learn to see it differently, you just find that you just start attracting money, and it comes in all different ways.
And that was one of the things that helped me when I talk about the year I broke the $100,000 mark in my business. One of the things that really helped me was I'm looking forward to all the unique ways money is going to come to me. And what was fascinating was how many checks I got in the mail that I didn't even earn. Like, it didn't have to do with my work. It had nothing to do with my business in the sense of what I was doing, but yet checks were coming in the mail from the most bizarre locations. And so sometimes having to broaden your scope on how you choose to define how money is going to come to you is a problem. Like if you think it has to come to you through your business, that is really narrowing the focus of what how money operates. And that's just one of those crazy things. A lot of people are like, oh, you're in the law of attraction. I'm like, no, I didn't know anything about Esther Hicks when I was teaching in 2005. I was just talking about life experience of keep your mind wide open. So keeping that mindset working. Do you have any suggestions for us, Nikki, on how to stay in a receptive mind space, even though reality may be demonstrating something quite different?
Yeah, you do want to stay in a receptive space. And that's another good point. Sometimes we want something like money, but we won't allow it into our life. It's one thing to ask, right? Like ask and it is given. You mentioned Esther Hicks, but are you allowing it in? And if there's a lot of resistance around money, start on a different subject. Start with allowing compliments. How many times have you been complimented? And you're like, oh, this old thing, oh, I've had it for years. Oh, my hair, oh. It's like if you can't allow a compliment in, you want to allow money in, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. So start small. Start allowing compliments. Start allowing somebody to pick up the tab if they choose to. Get practice being in the space of just allowing. So you could allow that money in. And in that tapping for 10K video I talked about, I have all those positive statements like Janine just said. I'm curious to see all the ways money might flow my way today. Money is all around. We live in an abundant world, all those positive sayings. And as you tap on them, you help to let that suggestion bypass the conscious mind and go right into your subconscious mind, where suddenly you just have that thought on autopilot.
One of my favorite sayings, of course, this is the little kid in me coming back out, was from Willy Wonka, which is where the grandfather is talking to the little kid, and he's saying, Charlie, don't focus so much on money. Did you know money's made every day? They make more money every day. There's an abundance of money. And so this is long before any of that stuff. And I remember that message coming through from Roald Dahl. So yeah, there's truth in all this, and you don't have to be in any specific camp with that. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes. Anybody have any questions for Nikki or want to add their own tip or technique that they use when they have overwhelm or they're sliding down that dark hole? Yes, Michael.
So a couple things. That one, along with what you're saying about accepting money from other places, I was looking at, if I was more organized, I'd have some sort of spreadsheet that shows me where all my money is coming from. And that would be a wonderful thing to have. I don't have it. But I was doing some back of the envelope math and realized that some of the largest single sources of revenue come from these things that I think of as like one-off things. Like there's a company I record content for, they put in their library, and I get royalties. $20 per month per piece forever. And so but they only pay every 6 months. There's no report. So I record a bunch of them. And then in March, I get paid. And I'm like, ooh, right, I should totally record more of these because look how well this pays. And I'll record 10, 15, and then completely forget about it. And then in August, I wish I'd recorded more 6 months ago. And I'm committed to doing at least 15 before the next cycle because, I have a curriculum I can just apply to that. But it's just realizing that I have these other sources of revenue that are complete sidelines. Some are completely passive. And then the other thing I've been realizing recently is that I have the places money is coming from and the places stress are coming from, and they're not the same. And some of these things, like, why am I still doing these things if they don't make money and they're not bringing joy? Like, not making money and bringing joy. Okay. Not bringing joy but making money, okay, but not making money and not bringing joy, why is that still here? And that's kind of as I was talking to my coach about that this afternoon. But like there's certain things. I'm actually going to be 2 of the summits currently on my calendar I'm canceling. So I'm like, I'm not excited about them and I'm not getting paid for them. Why am I running them? Just getting rid of them.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Bravo. Drew, what can we do for you?
Nikki, I love what you talk about, and I wish you would have done that 1, 2, 3 with the hypno. Yeah,
Oh,
I just love that. You know, you talk about the deep breath has been so important for me because, you know, it takes me from that emotional state I was in where I probably would say or do something I'd rather not do back into that rational state. And I found that when I am in that rational state after the deep breath, the overwhelm dissipates and then my creativity and my innovation comes back. And I think that's very important to realize that when we're overwhelmed and we have that brain fog, it switches to a part of our brain that doesn't allow us to think freely and think differently. And we get stuck in that fixed mindset. So, I mean, the whole calm method just makes so much sense scientifically and it works. So.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you for saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we want to pay attention to how we feel, even around the subject of money. Like Michael, you were saying that some of the summits you were going to cancel because you were doing it and it wasn't feeling good. Lead from the energy that you want to create with. So if something feels good and exciting, then do it. And I started looking at everything as money coming my way. Even if I'm not getting paid to do something, there was somebody I went to go, somebody had a group coaching program and she asked me to come and speak on a topic. And I wasn't getting paid for it, but I was excited. It was a chance to share my message. And I think it was 4 months later, one of the women in that group, I guess she was following me, she reached out to me. She ended up being in a group coaching program that I had. So it's true if you were to say that everything leads to money, because it does in some way. And looking at everything, actually, we're all surrounded by money. I see like a microphone, you're on some kind of a laptop or a device, you've got Wi-Fi. Like we are sitting on piles of money. That's another positive affirmation for you. And it's true. And then you just start, you know, where your focus goes, energy flows. So it's learning how to put your focus on what you want. And when you don't, just notice it, give yourself grace, and choose again.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to mention something you mentioned about procrastination earlier, and I'm a firm believer that procrastination is an illusion, because when you peel back the onion, and more often than not, the thing you're holding off not doing is usually something you don't need to be doing. Because if you're able to think about, is this a priority? Is it something that's going to lead me to generating more revenue? A lot of times it's not, and you're feeling guilty. You should get it done because you promised somebody you'd get it done, or it's not something that you really want it, that you don't need to do it. So sometimes I think procrastination's a gift.
It could be. Yeah, that's a good point. One of my clients was telling me that yesterday. She was procrastinating on doing the thing she told other people that she would do because she felt like she was indebted to them and that she should do it. And if she didn't, she would feel guilty. So her problem wasn't procrastination. It was all the other stuff.
You know, that's people pleasing is a form of self-sabotage. I know it's an overused term, but people pleasing is that self-sabotage because you're doing everything for someone else. So, and that can lead to procrastination. So
that's right.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to share, because you're talking about the guilt, especially around money. And one thing I've come to realize is that a lot of that guilt, that's not just natural guilt. Like there are people who benefit from you being guilty about money. There are companies that make a lot of money because people get guilty around money. So the fact that you're so traumatized, that we're also traumatized around money, we don't look at our credit card statements and don't run a budget and don't think about that, or that causes us to go and have retail therapy or eat away our fears or whatever. It's not just the way it is. It's the way some people definitely want it to be for a very specific reason. So, and then with things like, oh, my credit card debt got out of control. Well, yeah, it's meant to. It's designed to be a little tricky to access your credit card statement. And it's designed to be really easy to spend money. And it's designed to be hard to keep track of what you're doing and to be a very slick slide. And there are very powerful forces pushing you in that direction. And you're just one person who needs, you need a corporate level system for your personal finances. And if you don't have that, well, that's kind of how they want it to be. So, the guilt of I ran up credit card debt is what they want you to think, not to get all tinfoil hatty, but it's what they, capital T, what they want. But so you can, eliminate the, of course you were beaten by $1 billion corporation. Don't be guilty about it. You're outmatched.
Well, you were talking about the tinfoil hat, and it's like, it's not really serious until you put on the vest too. You're okay. And that comes from an old cop from New York City who said on his very first year that the old veterans would be like, until you meet the tinfoil hat and vest, you don't really know what crazy is. Oh, you just have the tinfoil hat, you're fine. It's when you put the vest on too, things get a little sketchy. All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Nikki. We're going to wrap this up at this time. Thanks so much for everybody else who donated their time, expertise, their advice with that. And we will move on to the next speaker.